chairs. You know, I feel uncomfortable, and I tell them that. So as a rapport building thing, it's that I felt like you, I am like you. And what we do is get them on A4 paper to write down what happened. Went on the zip wire, ate marshmallows, made pizza, went canoeing, fell out with so-and-so, there were bugs in my tent. Yeah? And they just write down the event, and then we ask them as a group, we split them up in the individual groups, how did that make you feel? Because it's for primary school age children especially, they often lack sensory acuity and they lack the vocabulary to express how they feel and how they think. So we give them that, we help them to do that by taking it out of their unconscious into the conscious. And you get things like, like zip wire. I was scared, I was nervous, others, I was excited. And when they're sharing this, they think, well, I was scared, but you were excited. Which means they've got options. They didn't have to feel scared. There's another way of feeling. And as we know, the person with the most options and choices will be the most successful. What we then do is get them to lay down in chronological order from the beginning of their expedition here, the end of their expedition there. We lay it down in a timeline. And it's interesting that some of the children stand away from it, directing things, others are sort of stood in it, the in-time people, and they're putting paper down by their feet and treading on it all. And I often ask them, the ones who are stood right in the middle, there's an activity which you do where you say, where's your future, where's your past? And if your future's ahead of you and the past behind you, you're in time. And it's interesting that it's all the people who are always stood in the middle of the line are the ones who are operating in time. And that journey, laying it out in front of them, helps them to make sense of it and remember, and then we can reflect on it. What we then do is, okay, well, that's great. What situations in your life would having that ability or that skill that you've now learned be useful, And people come up with things, things like, when I've got to get my little brother up to have his breakfast, and I find it difficult. Because that's where the difference between good and great outdoor education is in the ability to brief and debrief, and in the skills of the facilitator to run an effective debrief or brief. Now, the summary really to my presentation, apart from this huge sense of achievement that the children get from achieving things that are difficult, and the sense of achievement that I get from helping them to do that, is before I understood and learnt about NLP, I had a pretty small toolkit of techniques, I now realise. And one of my favourite expressions is, if you've only got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I only had a hammer, But now what I've got a range of tools and techniques that I can bring out. The challenge I have now is which one, which is most appropriate for this particular situation. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation, and I hope you found it interesting. I would happily answer any questions that you have. So if you had any questions, what would they be? Yes.
Yeah, sure. How differently do you apply your techniques when you're working with adults as opposed to primary school age children?
I don't. It's not exactly the same. It's very, very similar. The difference is adults have generalizations flying everywhere, of course. Yeah. Adults generally have a greater sense of sensory acuity of what they're thinking and feeling, and they have a greater vocabulary to express it. With children, when they say I don't know, it means I can't think of the word to use quite often. So not a great difference. I'm happy not to answer any. Fiona.
Actually, it's an observation as much as a question, Nick. Sorry. I was really interested in what you were saying about when they're feeling excited or they're feeling anxious. And what I find really interesting is from a physiological point of view, anxiety and excitement are exactly the same response in the body. The only thing that's different is a thought.
Okay.
So I just was really interested that what you're getting them to do is identify the thought, which is what you can address. But what's actually happening to you physically is exactly the same whether you're feeling excited or anxious. So
Yeah.
So that's the same thing going on in the body.
I know that there's a thing called the chaos theory where, if you had an axis of arousal on one scale and then performance on another, as your arousal levels, excitement, adrenaline rises, your performance increases, which is great. But then what happens is, as it gets to a peak, it doesn't gradually tail off. It drops like a stone. And the key to outdoor education is getting them to that, you want them to be excited and anxious, and you want to get them in the zone, so to speak. But if you overcook it, it all breaks down incredibly quickly. And that's when you get the tears and sobbing. And that's where you can do a huge amount of damage in this. And I don't know if anyone remembers someone called John Ridgway in the world of outdoor education. He was called the Bastard Ridgway. And he pretty much killed the outdoor education industry back in the 70s or 80s by making executives climb up mountains and dive under freezing locks and things. And there was no sense of application to the workplace. Things have moved on a lot since then. It's completely inclusive. Nobody is made to do anything they don't want to do. And all the activities are designed to enable everyone to learn at different levels. Thank you.
I can't probably share.
No, you've got to talk into the big yellow microphone.
Okay. It's just really an observation. We're using NLP techniques very similar to what you use now. What I find with members of the teams that we do this is you take them out of their work environment and you perhaps have a day where you do the timeline and you've done all the work about what things are going to look like in the future. You've done all that. But then when they go back into that existing work environment, the benefit that they've perhaps had during that day sometimes get lost.
Yeah.
Just putting it back into the perspective that you've just done, and I know you go in and you do the debrief in their environment, but do you get feedback to say that actually they just revert back to the same, do you actually follow it up any further?
We do, because often we'll start working with children at, say, year 4, and they'll do a 2-day, 1-night expedition. The next year they'll come back with us and do a 3-day, 2-night, and then the year 6 they do a week. And so we get to see, and we get feedback from the teachers who say, the whole thing about the expedition is that it's a shared experience. In terms of building rapport, there's nothing better than a shared experience, commonality. So they know each other better at the end than they did at the beginning, and they know how each other operates and what skills each other have got. The hierarchy, the pecking order within the groups are re-established. The lad with the fanciest trainers is no longer the alpha male, so to speak. He's the one who fell apart during the canoeing trip. And the quiet, reflective ones are the ones who have suddenly made a great decision at the right moment, and their sort of status has gone up a bit, and we get that feedback a lot. Again, with outdoor education, it enables abstract concepts to be made real in practice. So communication, teamwork, motivation, assertiveness, they're just words. And in the outdoor world, you can get, let's say, a manager in your organization. They want to experiment with different ways of motivating. If they go experimenting in work, that can be damaging. But they can, when you're doing a bridge building, the barrels and planks type activity, they can experiment with a new way they've learned without any serious negative or financial consequences to the organization. So that's why I think it works. And like I said, we're different. We go back into the schools and do the debrief in schools, which is about, learning without application isn't learning, in my opinion. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Neil. Oh, you need the big yellow microphone, isn't it?
I was excited to try it out, to be honest.
Yeah.
I know that you say about metaphor, and I was just wondering to what extent you would preempt a potential problem on your expedition, perhaps before you actually get to whatever activity it is that they're going to undertake, whether you would use some sort of metaphor around the campfire about a specific activity before they actually get there.
Yes. What we do is it's all expedition based, which provides a context and a framework for what they do. If you go to some activity centres, you will do an abseil, you will go canoeing or kayaking, you will do archery, and there's no link necessarily between them. We go canoeing because we need to get from one place to another. We do an abseil because there's a steep drop in our way of our endpoint. So that in itself is a metaphor, and we brief that and introduce that so it becomes less contrived. Quite often, if I know I've got a difficult group and I know they're going to find something difficult and there's two of them who I think are going to really kick off, then I can preempt that by disassociating a metaphor, by saying, I had a group, or there was a group recently who found this difficult and they had to work really well together to achieve it. To trying to see off that potential conflict situation. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But quite often it's almost damage limitation. That sounds awful, but you know that they're going to fall out. But it's about letting them know that they might fall out and that communication is key in this task. So yeah, bits. I think we try and do that. No. Thank you very much.